Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fundamentals for Startups. I am Brady Ryan, manager at CoMotion Labs. For those of you that are new to us, CoMotion Labs provides multi-industry lab system hosting startup inside and outside of the UW community in life science, biotech, health tech, medical devices, robotics, hardware, software, IT, and fintech. If you run a startup, chances are we can help. Our startups range from pre-seed to Series A, employing 2 to 15 folks each, and are variously headed by students, faculty, and community leaders, with both new and seasoned entrepreneurs represented. While we wait for everybody to log in, I'll make a few announcements. Next week, we have a special edition of Fundamentals with Halloween horror stories, featuring some scary stories from startup entrepreneurs. Startup life is always difficult, but it can be downright terrifying when things go wrong. All of our Fundamentals for Startups presentations are archived on our CoMotion website under lab/startup training videos. We've covered a variety of topics over the past several years, so if you find yourself with some free time, or maybe there's a pandemic on or something, check out our past talks. For the full schedule and to register for future fundamentals, please visit comotion.uw.edu/events. This year, we're proud to partner with Bluetooth to support the Fundamentals for Startups program. See how Bluetooth audio sharing is poised to once again change the way you will experience audio and connect with the world around you.
Bluetooth introduced the world to wireless audio. Calling, listening, watching, making us safer, more productive, more joyful. It's part of the fabric of our lives. Now, Bluetooth will bring us even closer to each other and our world with audio sharing. It will let us share with others our music, our experiences, listening and watching together. The places we go will share with us, enriching our experiences, helping us hear our world. Breaking down barriers between interests, cultures, generations. Introducing Bluetooth audio sharing. Closer together.
All right. Today, Martis Bagley is here to discuss sustainability in hardware, how and why. Martis is a creative director and co-founder at Nonfiction, a design firm based in San Francisco. He specializes in industrial design and sustainability of consumer electronics, neurotech, lifestyle, soft goods, and packaging solutions. He has designed for the likes of Nike, Facebook, Logitech, Dell, Chevron, Jiffy Lube, Corning, and for mid-sized companies and startups too numerous to count. His direct efforts have garnered tens of millions of dollars in sales and venture capital funding. Prior to Nonfiction, Martis built his own personal audio brand, Felt Audio, from the ground up. He is the co-host of Future, a video series about design and the future of everything, and teaches sustainability and social impact at the California College of the Arts. Martis will take all questions via chat. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and I will interrupt him if it fits. I will now turn the event over to Martis.
Well, hi, Brady. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for this talk by CoMotion and Fundamentals for Hardware. Sorry, Fundamentals for Startups. As Brady said, my name is Martis Bagley. I'm an industrial designer, and we're going to talk about sustainability and how I've approached it through my practice. So, as I said, I'm an industrial designer, but I'm also an educator at the California College of the Arts. What I teach there is sustainability and social impact. So I try to get kids to understand all the products that they create, how they affect people's lives, either positively or negatively. I also co-founded a company, a studio called Nonfiction. We're in San Francisco. We like to say we turn science fiction into reality for a better future. And what that really means is we work with cutting edge startups and larger corporations to bring never seen before technologies to market and make them usable and consider human factors and how we can increase adoption across many platforms. Right now, we are on 4 continents, working on 4 continents, and we're serving 6. These are some of the companies we work for, and Brady covered a number of them. You may recognize a few of them. We're always, engaging all kinds of very, very cool and cutting-edge companies. And this is our team. It's made up of a very diverse group of people, from industrial designers to computational designers, architects. We also have a color material finish designer, as well as engineers, project program developers. And we even have a Emmy award-winning storyteller and producer on our team, because it's so much about what we do is not just creating things, it's creating experiences that are well told to the consumer. So sustainability and hardware, the risks and rewards. So basically what we'll cover today is why, what, and how. Why sustainability? Why are we talking about this? And then we'll jump into examples in practice. And some of these are taken directly from my experiences, and some are just really good examples already out in the marketplace. And then finally, the fun stuff, getting into the takeaways and maybe a little bit of materials and actionable items. So first off, why are we talking about this? Well, we all recognize this, right? And if you don't, it's you need to just look out in the Pacific Ocean. It's a piece of plastic floating in the ocean, and there's something out there called a garbage patch. Currently, it's affecting creatures like this guy right here. And what it's doing is it's disrupting our ecosystem. We create a lot of products. They're not well maintained. They're not well managed. And it's affecting the world around us. This is where this turtle lives. This is Midway Island in the Pacific Ocean. It's a place where near the garbage patch, where nobody really goes very often. There's a small population there, but really trash just washes up on the beach all the time. And this is life in this island. This is the turtle's friends. He hangs out with people that have been eating trash and digesting it for years and years and years, because birds don't know better. We know not to do this, but the animal life, they just see this as another opportunity, something you need to be food, better tested out. And this is happening all over the islands in the Pacific. And if that isn't enough to make you stop and consider, this might. This is why we're talking about it. When I was a kid, my father's a contractor, and he would demolitions on buildings occasionally. We'd have to take trash to the dump, the landfill. And this was kind of cool when you're a kid. This is actually really exciting because you get to go explore. And back then, it wasn't just food. It was, you'd find cars in there and refrigerators and all kinds of unique and weird materials. But in today's reality, this is not a cool thing. I can tell you from my experience, when I was a kid, I could literally see the houses that bordered the landfill, because we're in a small community and the landfill was on the edge of town. Over time, as I got older, that landfill filled up. They covered it with dirt, planted grass, and moved the new landfill way outside of town, so nobody knew it was there. And the people living next to the landfill now had a field where they can play soccer. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And for most of us, certainly in America, that's kind of how we live. Trash is out of sight, out of mind. But if you're in a developing country, emerging economy, sometimes a third world country, the picture right here is how they live their life, potentially. So while it's out of sight and out of mind for us, it's still very relevant in a lot of parts of the world, because they don't have the resources to manage recycling or cleaning up. And why this is important, because believe it or not, in 2018, they discovered that we actually have microfibers in our own bodies. Just a few years ago, they did analysis on human feces, and they found microplastics, little tiny filaments. And this could be polyesters, this could be little parts of water bottle. And we can imagine how this might make it into our system through things like takeaway packaging for food. We certainly do a lot of home delivery and disposable packaging and disposable masks in the pandemic that we're in right now. So all it takes is to inhale or swallow a little bit. So recently, they also did a test of 47 cadavers within the last couple of years that found plastic in all our major filtering systems in the human body. So lungs, liver, kidney, we have plastic deep inside of us. So it's no longer the turtle or the bird, it's actually us. And this is why we're talking about it. Oops. So part of the problem with plastic is not only that it doesn't belong in our body, it's called an endocrine disruptor. And what that is, it's a hormonal disruptor for the human body. It affects our ability to reproduce. It affects our immune system. It affects how we do so many things in our lives. And this is why a few years ago, you may recall that they removed what was called BPA from plastic bottles. They found out that BPA is a huge endocrine disruptor. And so they removed it from all the bottles and replaced it with other materials. That doesn't mean that all the harm's gone. It just means it's reduced below the governmental regulation levels so we can use these plastics. But what's interesting is, we're harming ourselves, but the world will go on. And this book called The World Without Us by Alan Weisman is actually a really interesting book about how the world recovers in the absence of humans. And we don't like to think about that, but it is a reality. The world grows and it will recover and it will go on without us because it moves at geological scale. We could make some plants and animals go extinct, but there are plenty more of them. There's only one human species. If we make ourselves go extinct, the world will be fine without us. So I recommend we don't do this. And if you have any questions whatsoever about this, take a look at this. This is a picture by a website called Behind Closed Doors. It's a picture from 1958, the nuclear plant of Chernobyl. And hopefully everyone here recognizes the name Chernobyl. It was the worst nuclear power disaster on the planet. And this is 1958. Well, this is what it looks like today. So nature does survive. Nature does go on without humans. Another picture of Chernobyl. Hundreds of humans everywhere. Not a whole lot of plants. The minute the disaster happened, and if we take a look at what's going on there today, nature survives and it goes on. And this is really important to remember because, human populations have a bigger impact than radiation in some case, right? We are everywhere. We're all over the planet. We're being very wasteful. We're creating materials and products and plastics that wasn't originally part of the ecosystem. And then we throw them back into the ecosystem. And this is damaging everybody. So if we remove the humans, even a nuclear power disaster allows animals to come back. They'd rather be in an environment where there's no nuclear or where there's no humans than there is one with nuclear waste. And this guy's doing just fine. He's actually laying down. He's not dead. But they found out in Chernobyl, there's wolves, there's horses, there's all kinds of animals and vegetation that have grown back with great abundance. And sure, they have also effects of the nuclear radiation, but apparently it's less than effects of the human population. So to drive that home, our effects have created loss of diversification. It's affected our food, water, and air resources. That, by the way, is a picture of the Dust Bowl in the 1920s. So we started developing frameworks of sustainability. We know that sort of the original concept was to pull natural resources out of the ground, put them into factories, we create products, we sell them, consumers purchase them, and they get thrown in the landfill. Happens again and again. But we found out there's problems. As I said before, we can't just hide our trash. We try to, but a lot of the trash is not biodegradable. It's not compostable, and it's certainly not non-toxic. It causes problems in hormonal disruptors. So it's hurting our planets, and ultimately it's hurting ourselves. But there's a lot of opportunities here too. Trash can also be a resource. Can we mine this? Can we recover some of it? Can we sell it again and create a economy around trash? Well, this is kind of how reduce, reuse, and recycle came about. The recycling economy is really about, and I knew my image would drop out. Sorry about that. But when you look at the recycling economy, you go from manufacturing to retail sales to recycling plant to natural resources. So you're recycling this material. So for instance, you have a plastic, it goes through a process, you sell it on the open market, and then instead of throwing it into a landfill, it gets recycled into another product and another product. And we're pretty familiar with this concept, but there's a problem with this concept. And the problem is that as you recycle plastic, it goes down in quality again and again. It's never as pure or as clean. It has a lot of different attributes that keep it from performing as well. For instance, when you manufacture a phone and it has plastic in it, all those plastic parts are very small and very delicate and have to perform in a certain way. When you develop a moving part, a mechanism, it has to work very flawlessly. In recycled plastic content, it doesn't work as well. It has too many impurities. So this is kind of the problem. So then we read something called Cradle to Cradle. And if you haven't read it, you should consider reading it. It was a book by William McDonough and Michael Brunhart. And what's really cool about this is they thought about the recycling economy and said, we can do better. We can make something even better than this. And they give a number of frameworks. One of them is called the Upcycling Economy. So instead of just recycling and putting the product back into the ecosystem again and again, so a plastic bottle then could be melted down, reused, and used in fabric, and the fabric can be reused in something else. They say, why can't we use the product, instead of putting it in a landfill, we upcycle it to a product that actually is better than what it began as. A perfect example of this might be cardboard boxes. We, like no other time in history, I'm sure, we're shipping more products now, especially with the pandemic, than ever. So we produce a lot of cardboard. And most of this cardboard gets either recycled into more cardboard boxes, or it gets downcycled into compost that can be put in the garden or a field. But what if we take that cardboard, impregnate it with seeds, and then instead of throwing away your cardboard box or recycling it, you put it in the garden and it grows food, or it grows trees or something that is more valuable. So this is the idea of upcycling, taking a product and making it better the second time around rather than downcycling it. Miranda Wang here in the Bay Area started a company called BioSelection. And what this is she takes things like plastic bottles, waste from food packaging delivery, and she chemically recycles it. And what that means is she reduces the polymers to monomers, reconstitutes them, and then creates at the very end a better type of plastic. So you took a very low-level packaging or bottle plastic and turned it into something like a elastomer that has a lot more interesting qualities, like a rubber. It has a lot more value on the open market. You can purchase this plastic for a lot more, for a higher cost. So she's actually upcycling. This is brand new technology. You should check out our website. I've included the link below. But one of these problems is, as I said, single-use packaging. There aren't a whole lot of places to put single-use packaging, and it's actually kind of a tragedy. We've gotten used to picking things up and throwing them away. We've gotten used to this, once it's out of sight, out of mind. Well, what if we have a single-use alternative? Maria Kurian, she's a UK-based designer, came up with an idea to use rice and starch gelatin to recreate the plastic cup. Well, what's so exciting about this is it'll break down over time. The first one would last 10 seconds. The next one she did would last 10 minutes. And she's gotten to the point where she can get these to last 2 days before they break down. She did a study, and this is a great example, is marathon runners will run through a race. They would pick up the glass of water and they would throw it away and waste it instantly as they're running. Well, if they throw this away and it only lasts just one quick shot of water, who cares? Because it's just starch and gelatin. It just dissolves away into something very innocuous. And then, this wouldn't be ideal for, retail shelves to sit in plastic bottles for a long period of time, but it would be great at the, at a restaurant where you knew you're going to be there an hour. And if the glass lasts 2 days, then great. So there's a lot of cutting edge things that are happening that are changing single-use plastics. One of the things that is not changing is, believe it or not, this might look familiar. We've all been hand sanitizing, using pumps for gels and things like that lately, but it's also used heavily in the cosmetics industry. And the problem with this is, even if you design a product with all the recycled content, the way this is constructed is there's probably 4 different materials, from plastics to rubber, gaskets, to the spring that's steel that pumps the liquid out. No recycling center in its right mind would actually tear this apart. It takes too much work, it takes too much time, and it's hard to identify the plastics. It doesn't fit their financial model. They too have to make money. So, figuring out a solution to this would be amazing. And we'll talk about a few of those. So we have 2 cycles here, the biological cycle and the technical cycle. When we talk about the cardboard boxes, those fall in biological cycles. There's things that have been brought up out of nature, wood, possibly glass, things that can be recycled back into its own system without doing harm. Now, technical cycle are things like plastics that we've altered the chemical qualities of to create things that we need. Now, we can recycle those things back into its own system again. Like I said, plastic bottles can go on and become, plastic tables or benches, chairs, or fabric even, as long as it stays. So if you have the biological cycle and the technical cycle, they work great, recycling within each cycle. If you mix those 2, that's called a monstrous hybrid. You never want to mix those 2, because if you put like a wood next to a plastic in a product and you glue it or permanently bond it, it can't ever be removed, or not removed easily, when you go into the recycling plant. And guess what? They just throw it in the trash. They don't have the time or the energy or possibly the knowledge to remove it. So we try to keep those biological and technical cycles separate. Which brings us to the next framework, and that's called natural capitalism. So right now, the US runs on a capitalistic structure, right? We go out, we buy products. It's a very economically viable concept of how to do business, but it's not really sustainable. To make it sustainable, we need to merge the economic values with the social values and with the environmental values. And by doing this, we build a much healthier, more resilient economy as a whole. And I think there's no better example of this than Patagonia. Patagonia does natural capitalism exceptionally well. They create lots of products that are well considered. They look at their supply lines. They look at their life cycle analysis, where the raw material comes from and where it goes. They look at what the end of life looks like for this. Does someone throw it away? Can they themselves buy it back or return it and then recycle it? So they're very considerate and conscious of this, to the point of, actually, they're very active in the environment. They do a lot of activism. They produce videos and movies that promote sustainability and environmentalism. And it's part of their core values. It's part of what they do. And I've had friends who've worked for Patagonia over the years, and they go to work, they work their butt off, then they take a 2-hour lunch and they go surfing, because they can do that. Because the company values not just the sustainability of the product, they value a sustainable story in happiness with employees that also is returned in economic sales and producing better products. This is really a big deal. At one point, they introduced an advertisement called "Don't Buy This Jacket." And this is pretty profound, I suppose, for a company that sells jackets. But the idea was, they said, we don't want you to buy the jacket if you don't need it. We put a lot of work into this. It took, gallons and gallons of water to dye this fabric. It took a lot of energy that created carbon dioxide and greenhouse effects to create this jacket. Don't buy it unless you absolutely have to. And it's these values that really instill this natural capitalism that they still inside their company. So the pro tip is, don't just talk about being green or being sustainable, and it's called greenwashing. You have to actually do it, and you have to be authentic and be sustainable to be lucrative. So another one, this one I actually, my partner at Nonfiction and I got to work years ago with the House of Marley through another studio that we were actually working at. And this is a story about committing from the start. So you might recognize this guy. This is Bob Marley. We were approached by the sons and daughters of Bob Marley to create a music brand, an audio brand that really kind of extolled the beauty of what he was about in his music. And if you look at the quote down there, it's one love, one heart. Let's get together and feel all right. So we stepped back and we looked at the strategy of this and said, oh, we can just do headphones and audio gear that looks like reggae, or it speaks to the cannabis smoking culture, which was illegal at the time. But we didn't really want to do that. We thought Bob's mission was more about love and harmony rather than the other Rastafarian approaches, I suppose. But so we took it on level and we said, love and harmony could be about the earth. It could be about the material story. What if we developed a brand that actually looked at FSC certified woods? What if we looked at a brand that used recycled fabrics and recycled aluminum? And we built it in a way where not only was it using recycled content, but it could be easily torn apart. We call this design for disassembly. So at the end of the life cycle, it's easy for the recyclers to pull this apart and throw it into the separate bin so it could be properly recycled. And these are some of the products that we worked on. And as you can see, the woods and the fabrics and the soy-based inks and things that are non-toxic were really, really important with this brand. And we want to give it to them for letting us take all these chances and doing all these amazing things to make the brand what it was, because most brands don't want to do that because it's costly, it's risky. But we committed from the start. We said we want to make this brand, we want to be very eco-conscious and make it powerful in its own right. And they too give back to the planet. They give in a number of different ways. One of them is planting lots of trees. So the pro tip here is, don't think about sustainability as an afterthought. It's really hard to do at the end of the process or even the middle. Think about it right from the beginning, commit to it, and build it part of your brand values. And when things get tough, don't give up. This is really, really important. Another brand I like is called Sunski. They actually make sunglasses from recycled content. And they're doing this in a way that is very, very economically valuable and viable to them. As I said earlier, it's hard to make really fine and delicate, high performance plastics unless you're using raw, brand new virgin material. Well, Sunski went out and sourced a vendor that actually is using plastic particles from ocean, floating around the ocean, and then creating their sunglasses. The sunglasses, while styled really well, are not very technologically advanced in terms of, they don't have batteries and PCBs and all these difficult things to mold, but they can create a beautiful sunglasses, very stylish, and they can embed this into their deeper story about what Sunski is. And they've done this through creating packaging that is also very friendly to the environment with no plastics. They too give back, because that's part of their story, is they give back to the environment through 1% for the planet or the Surf Riders Foundation. So the pro tip here is, sustainability doesn't have to be complex, but it does have to have style. So Nike, we're all familiar with this company. And what they're really good at doing is changing perception. Their latest shoes, they've been exploring a lot of recycled content. And as you can see here, the fabrics and the plastics look pretty unusual. They're not the traditional black or bright fluorescent or those colors that we see. They're using a lot of materials that they've sourced from waste, taking them from other, fabric mills that are throwing things away, recycling content, and reusing it in their designs. And this is why they have such an interesting variety of color. And you can see the many different types of plastic melted into the sole of the shoe. But they've done it in a way where you can see the content, the plastic, the recycling, but it's still extremely beautiful. And this is what we're talking about, change the perception of what value is. It doesn't have to, things don't have to be glossy and shiny and black or white. They need to be colorful, and they need to be alive, and they need to have a certain texture and brilliance. And I think recycled content more than ever can really do this. And they're setting themselves apart from the competition by doing this. So the pro tip here is don't be boring, be daring, and redefine beauty. You may have heard of Loop. Loop is a company that's actually going from a very core level need that everybody uses products. Everybody has, food and disposables that they use on a regular basis, shampoos, things like that. And they said, rather than having all these single-use plastics, can we have something that is a permanent bottle, container, vessel that we fill up with these different brands, products, and then we ship to the consumer. The consumer uses the product. They eat the ice cream as here in the Haagen-Dazs example. And then they put the dirty package back into the box. Loop picks it up, cleans it, recycles it, and uses it again and again. So no plastic going into the ocean or landfills or anywhere else. And this reminds me of when I was growing up, they were just sort of ending the whole idea of buying Coke bottles. Coke bottles, when you used to buy them, you would get 10 cents back, or depending on the state you're in, and you would give it back to the manufacturer. They would clean it, wash it, fill it up full of soda again, and then send it back, resell the product. And I thought that was brilliant. We've gotten away from that. Well, Loop is going back to that story, and they're really looking at it in a very beautiful way, as you can see with these containers. So pro tip, changing behaviors can be challenging, but it can also be very rewarding, both sustainably and financially. We have the privilege here at Nonfiction to work with the Singaporean government to redesign the education of Singapore. And we did it through a school project called Movida. And while the project is really, really pretty big, this is sort of a still picture of a VR environment that we created to tell our story. But the project is pretty big, so I won't go over the whole thing. But what I think is really important is identifying the pillars that we set up for the school. And the pillars are about carbon neutrality, synesthetic learning, hackable school, borderless education, mental health, and happiness. And why we set these up rather than, reading, writing, arithmetic is because these are the core things that we as humans look at. These are the core things to our health and happiness. It's going to help us flourish in future jobs, and jobs that have never even been designed yet. Who knows what the next 100 years of jobs are going to look like. So are we teaching the right things? Sure, we'll teach all those things underneath these 5 pillars. But I think I want to call out the carbon neutrality part of this project. So we're designing architecture that is very considerate to the environment, that is low impact and doesn't put off as much carbon dioxide through energy use. So we're looking at breathing architecture. We're looking at how thermodynamics work into architecture. We're also considering solar panels, respiration, again, breathing as a building, and then wind power. And then considering biophilic spaces. It's also looking at nature to redesign our buildings and our spaces. And why this is important, not only is it beautiful and calming to us as humans, because nature is part of the evolution of us, but it reminds us that there is nature out there, and it reminds us we need to be considerate of it. So we tell a very deep material story about repurposed, regenerated, recycled, and re-engineered stories. And we let the kids design their own environment. If they want tabletop tables or they want tables that go on the floor, we let them do that. We kind of let them design their own. And then they can design their own playgrounds and things like that. We do this through a lot of recycled materials. So we allow the kids to build their own furniture and build their own chairs. And we do this, we built a web app that actually allows them to design them, put it together, test it out, and then print it through rapid manufacturing processes. But how do we do that? Well, we talked to a company called Precious Plastics, which sells very rudimentary and very attainable manufacturing machines. You can go out and buy these today as an individual. You don't have to be a big company. You can buy a plastic extruder, a grinder. You can buy things that will create plastics. So these kids, what we want to do is develop an idea that they're very conscious of the environment. They are aware that, oh, we need to recycle, and this will lower our carbon footprint. And some of the plastics that can be created with the Precious Plastics products are like this chair on the right-hand side. It's very beautiful. You can see all the different particles in it. It allows kids to explore creativity, engineering, understanding of the environment, and so much more. So we ask you to be a champion for awesome. New materials can set you apart from the competition. Like Nike, take a few chances, redefine what beauty is to you. And the pro tip here is create like future generations depend on it, because they do. And then let's talk about low impact packaging. We designed an FDA approved device, a wearable for people with hand tremors. And while the FDA approval process requires certain constraints around the packaging, so it can go against the skin without causing friction or undue circumstances, we did take the opportunity to work with the packaging on a sustainable level. So this is a product that, after it's been prescribed in the office, is directly shipped to the consumer. So it's not going to sit on the retail shelf where it has to make everybody jump out of the aisle and stand out. We can have some fun with not using a laminate on our packaging. Very important. We don't have to use detrimental inks or gloss over it that actually make it a little less sustainable. It's a little more toxic. We removed all that and just printed soy-based inks directly on the packaging. We didn't use plastic on the inside. We printed instructions on the packaging itself, so then people don't have too many instructions for use or quick start guides. And then we removed the twist ties or the clamshell that holds the product in place by creating an environment where everything's stacked closely together using cardboard and the boxes itself. So let's jump into a few more of the fun things. So tools, what can you apply right now? Life cycle analysis is a big story inside of sustainability, and this is one you should definitely know about. When we look at life cycle analysis, we have to look at from the very beginning of where the product starts to the very end of where it ends up. Is it a tree and that ends up in the ground? Is it some oil that ends up in a landfill? What does that look like? How is it affected, and what's the energy it uses? So a great example would be paper versus plastic. And we've all seen this before. The discussion goes on. Well, we know paper is, it's good quality. It'll break down over time. It does harvest trees, so that's a consideration. But it can be easily recycled. So we like that. That's great, right? But if we don't recycle and we put it into compost, then it creates CO2, which is not a really good thing. On the flip side, plastic is a little bit cheaper than plastic. It's definitely more high performance. Those bags can take a beating. You can use them over and over again. But the problem is it creates damage to the environment. There's a lot of CO2 that's created in the process. And there's not a really good recycling infrastructure. Typically bags can be recycled, but the problem is that most of the equipment that they use at these high processing recycling plants isn't equipped to handle the bags. They gum up the machinery and things like that. So it's not a really good solution. So we like to look at the whole gamut, and a life cycle analysis will tell us what the costs and the benefits of both of those are, taking in all those considerations I just talked about. So one of the tools I've used in the past is called Sustainable Minds. And I teach this at the California College of the Arts. And I teach it to the students so they can understand what it takes to build a product and what the options are. So they can use their database online. They can put in, this is what the product's made of, how it is produced, and they can get numbers out of it and say, oh, this is the carbon impact. They can look at the non-toxic, or they can look at the toxic and the carcinogenic materials and things like that, and they come up with sort of value. So as you can see in this example, the toasters, they can compare, through several different iterations, what is the ideal solution for creating a low impact product. If I look a little bit closer, this is some slides from one of my classes. I have all my students break down a product. In this case, they broke down a razor. And I apologize, it is not showing up. But we're going to share this deck with everyone, so we'll be able to show a little bit more. But the moral of the story is that I have the kids tear down the product, completely tear it down, identify every different aspect of the product, and then input the numbers. They input the weights, they input the volume. And for instance, like a plastic part, they might say, oh, well, it was manufactured here. It took this much energy to pull the oil out of the ground, to process it into a usable plastic. It takes this much to mold it based on its size and then produce it. So check out Sustainable Minds. And there are lots of other life cycle analysis tools out there. This is just one I've used. So I recommend you check them all out. Another good one is biomimicry. So biomimicry is really looking towards nature, and is trying to see what nature has had millions of years to perfect things. And it's been 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, barely, and we're still working some things out. So it's really, really smart to look at nature and see how they did it, and if we can mimic it and we can apply these strategies to how we design things. One of the examples would be the Shinkansen bullet train in Japan. It's a beautiful train. It goes upwards of 200 miles an hour. But the problem was every time it'd go through a tunnel, it'd create these horrible sounds, almost like sonic booms, that would disrupt the neighbors and the environment. And so they stepped back and they look at a bunch of different solutions. And the one that came to mind was the kingfisher bird's beak. And the shape of it and the ability to fly through the air and grab fish and things like that really allowed it to perform exceptionally well. So the designer of the Shinkansen included that shape in the front of the bullet train, and it then allowed it to fly through these tunnels without a sound. It actually allowed it to use 15% less electricity and use 10% and go 10% faster. These are really, really important things when you're developing products and trying to be sustainable and save the planet in the long run. The concept of Velcro, which is hook and loop, actually came from I believe, an engineer in 1941 when he was walking with his dog, and the burrs from different plants got stuck in the dog's hair, and of course he had to pull it out. He looked at it under a microscope and realized, oh wow, there's a lot of really cool things we can learn from this. And reconstructing it in more of a manufacturing way, he was able to recreate what we call hook and loop or Velcro. And nowadays, some of the newest evolutions of biomimicry is called generative design. Generative design is using the computer to input different forces and shapes and let it figure out the best way to model something. So for instance, on the bottom picture, this gentleman here is working on a frame at Johnson Space Center. It's a frame for a rocket ship, and he wants to use the least amount of material possible, the strongest amount of material and use of force, the structure possible. And how he did that is he input the data into a computer and allowed it to do it, create this form for him, which is the most efficient possible. Coincidentally, this is really, really similar to birds' bones. If you look at birds' bones, they're hollow and they're hyper efficient in their structure. So it was kind of a learning process of both, the generative design and looking at biomimicry to come up with something better. So check out biomimicry.org. They have a lot of great resources there. They have a lot of learning opportunities. They also have, there's also a website called Ask Nature, and this is fun for kids and adults alike. You can just put in, just like you would Google, type in any sort of question around nature and sustainability, and it'll pop up its best answers. And it's pretty cool stuff in the biomimicry world. So one of the other things I teach at CCA is called Drawdown. And it's a book by Paul Hawken. And Drawdown, it looks at 100 most sustainable solutions to global warming. And this is really important because some of them are very direct product related, some are more experience related. Now this one says 80 because it was a couple of years ago. They update it every year. So you can go and check out their website for Project Drawdown, and they update this, and you can get this information just right off the website. And it's really dense, a lot of good information there. But some of the top areas for influence are refrigeration, wind turbines, reducing food waste. These are all big hits to our carbon footprint. So if we just redesign the refrigeration, will that save things? Would that make our life better and our greenhouse gases less? Maybe we need to eliminate the refrigerator altogether and then actually just eat fresh food out of the garden every day. So you have to have a garden next to you. So what I love about this book, it kind of encourages us to look well beyond what we've got and look at the problems and seek new opportunities. And some of the book is about problems, some of it's about opportunities, and it's all measured in a number of different ways. It's, as you see in this picture, it shows parts per million reduction in carbon in the atmosphere. And then it gives a lot of other data points and some sort of more experiential conversations about the product. Another resource is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. She's been doing this for a number of years, creating a platform to talk and educate about the circular economy and talk and educate about sustainability. And this is really important to stay up on top of knowledge. And when I look at it, I see all the opportunities. And I encourage you to look at it and see opportunities as well. So I think finally, let's look at some future materials. What are we using in hardware that really is changing the landscape of sustainability? Well, first and foremost, 3D printing, but we call it rapid manufacturing. And what's really interesting about this is not every bit of 3D printing is sustainable, but there are a number of PLAs and other types of materials that are extremely sustainable. PLA, if you don't know, is a corn-based plastic. So they process corn and they chemically refine it into what looks and feels like a plastic, essentially, and then can be put into recycling or composting situations at high volume facilities to reclaim later. But what's neat about the story about this is short run production lends itself to a large variety of new materials. And this is what I'm talking about in the rest of the deck is when you try to use recycling materials in traditional manufacturing, it's really challenging. When you try to use it in short run production, you have a lot more hands-on ability to craft and create different things that may not be readily accessible in your traditional injection molding plant. So we look at composted leather. So this is a artist who is taking a lot of like scrap leather pieces from manufacturing processes and reconstituting and combining them into a hard board that actually can be turned into tabletops and really beautiful furniture. And then this is the fun one. This is ceramics made from processed cow feces. And if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what does. Similar to terracotta, you can create certainly tableware, but you can also create planters. You can create all kinds of things from cow feces. Now we know that there's a lot of methane created in this. And so can we use this to our advantage to create products that we need without harming the environment and reusing it in a very traditional recycling way? Bacterial pigment is also great. So we use a lot of really toxic dyes and bleaches and things like that to add color to our fabrics. Can we use bacterias? Can we use algae? Can we use these things to color fabrics? And yes, we can. And we're starting to actually see this a tiny bit in the open environment. Coconut leather, another fine one. If you process coconut in certain ways, and I've included the names of the artists and manufacturers who have done this, and the book that it came out of, the new materials book, which I'll share at the end of the deck. Mycelium is another great one. You can take this mushroom material and create furniture out of it, lighting out of it. Imagine if you create packaging material out of it instead of using foams and plastic clamshells to protect your products when you're shipping into the retail environment. Algae and textiles. Algae absorbs carbon and it grows very fast, and it can be used to dye things. It could be used to texture things. Milk-based plastic, waste milk. There's tons of waste milk in the milk process. They throw a lot of it out. Sometimes it's because of, problems with hormones or different sicknesses, but also just because it's gone old. Well, this designer has figured out a way to create plastic out of it. And what's really interesting about this is, one, it's a needed thing to save this resource, but also the texture is really just beautiful. And then, like the precious plastic slide I showed earlier, this is recycling and re-extruding plastic. And it's certainly the artists had a lot of fun doing it in very fun ways and exotic and beautiful ways. But we need to look well beyond where we're at in terms of recycling. We need to look well beyond what the opportunities are and what is beauty to us, and find new realities. And then finally, one of my favorites is inks from pollution. So imagine if we can extract the pollution from the air, we can extract the carbon from the air and turn it into something that we can then dye gray clothing. We can dye paints. And we actually have one of these markers at the studio. You can buy this at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, which is also a great place to buy a lot of really beautiful and sustainable products. But the Sharpie ink pen made from carbon pollution is really the most beautiful black, deep ink you've ever seen. And while it's not realistic to do this in mass and save the world, it is a beautiful story, and it makes me think about, oh, what else can we do with this waste material of pollution? Here are the books that I've referenced, among many, but these are my favorites. Radical Matter, Rethinking Materials for a Sustainable Future. There's a lot of textures and a lot of materials and a lot of storytelling going on there. So check that one out. I've included the links down here also. Why Material Matter. That's also a great book. And Designing for Different Futures. This one's really pretty radical. It's not so much about sustainability or materials, but when we're thinking about the future, sustainability inevitably will be in there. So check that out. So the takeaway today is select materials from sustainable sources. You make sure those sources are reliable over time. So once you select, let's say, a bamboo, Are you going to have that resource forever? Is there a good sustainable resource? Is it growing quickly? Typically, yes. But you got to look farther out and say, is this going to last, thousands or millions of production units that I need? Know your factory. Develop a relationship with them. Because what's really important about the factory is, you got to make sure they're using all the right materials, and they don't change the materials. Oftentimes in a pinch, if they run out of the material, they'll change it on you, and they won't ever tell you. So you make sure they sign really good quality control documents that make them stay in line with what they've committed. Oh, it looks like my numbers are off. Consider producing domestically. Just producing domestically is great because that way you don't have ships going across the ocean or airplanes flying around more than they need to. This is lowering our carbon footprint, and it's going to save you a little bit of money in terms of gas and fuel. Educate yourself about sustainable design. Like I said, life cycle analysis, biomimicry, these are all really good resources of actual knowledge to use now. And don't buy or create monstrous hybrids. Remember, we talked about wood and plastic connecting together. Make sure you don't connect them in a way where they can't be separated at the recycling point, because if you do, they're called monstrous hybrids. And remember, sustainability isn't just about designing for things that need to be recycled. It's actually about just designing something beautiful and well made that people don't ever have to throw it away. They don't have to put it in the recycling bin. I have a 1930s General Electric fan that still works today. I love it. It's a very specific design of that period, but I'll never throw it away. And that's a really good example. And finally, be a part of the sharing economy. Maybe you don't even have to buy products at all. Maybe you're sharing with friends and family. Maybe you sell your car and you take more car sharing services. And maybe you're renting tools, and these are all really important things. So with that, a couple more resources that I can provide. So my company, Nonfiction, creates a video series called Future, and it's on YouTube. If you look up Nonfiction Design on YouTube, we talk about a lot of different things, not just sustainability, but product development and how to create amazing products and experiences. And we also do at Ask Me Anything, AMA, once a month. We, through Eventbrite, we allow people to sign up for 15-minute conversations, and we can just chat about like what your hardware concerns are, how we can help you get to market. It's completely free. We're very open. We love to support our community, and I recommend you keep your eye out for that. And with that, that is my presentation, and I thank you all for the time together.
That's great. I love the AMA. Both you and Phenom and anybody who watched the Fundamentals for Hardware series. Phenom was one of our speakers, but both of you are just so accessible, and it seems like you have such great depth of information. So we really appreciate you speaking here. That was a lot of great resources. I was poking around on the Biomimicry Institute and asknature.org. Really cool information out there, and I think it's hard for a lot of people to find where all that is. So appreciate the flood of great resources you shared with us. To anybody who's listening, the chat bar is open. Feel free to ask questions. I want to start with one, kind of thinking about sustainability in general from sort of a societal point of view. It seems like there's a lot of ways to move the needle, a lot of different approaches. Sunski and Nike examples were showing kind of reclamation of waste. That audio brand by Bob Marley's family seemed like they were focusing on reusable, recyclable inputs. Loop is eliminating the single-use packaging. And I'm sure we need all of those approaches, but is there one approach that you think needs to be explored more, or one that you think is going to have an outsized role in sort of a greener future?
To be honest, I don't. Wouldn't that be great if we had a silver bullet? But there isn't. In the book I referenced called Project Drawdown by Paul Hawken, he lists 80 up to 100 different solutions for bringing down our impact on the planet. And This is the key thing. There isn't a silver bullet, but if we all practice something together, if we manufacture just with enough ideals of what a sustainable future would look like, then we can make the change that we need to bring down our carbon dioxide footprint. We can bring down the waste that we have. It takes a little bit of everything. I think that's the biggest point. And I would follow that up with the next biggest thing that I'm really excited about is towards the end, I showed you a lot of exotic materials. Mm-hmm. And to reiterate, a lot of those cannot be put into mass manufacturing in traditional forms. But more than ever, at least since the pre-industrial revolution, we have cottage industries doing small run manufacturing that include water jet cutting. It includes CNC and all these different processes that allow us to use these really exotic materials and bring up the level of not just, get out of this whole like black plastic paradigm we've been stuck in.
Yeah. One question from Srilatha, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. How do you think about design for sustainability when it comes to electronic designs, specifically around the electronic components?
Yeah, so the electronic components are probably the most difficult, just because what they are, they're sandwiched layers of silicone plastic, and then they put chips on top of them. There are a few companies out there, they're figuring out how to pull those chips off. I guess the one good thing about it is the chips keep getting smaller and smaller. To tell you the truth, I think when it comes to electronic devices, what frustrates me the most is that when I was studying industrial design many years ago, it was about, we're now merging software and hardware together to create electronic devices. And we are at a point where as an industrial designer, I have to build a better product and I have to make it work to the level of software, because software never really breaks. They just put a patch out and they fix it again and again. And the product could physically break over time. So what I find really disheartening is that every one of us has had a phone that the minute they upgrade the software, the phone becomes a brick because, they've gone beyond the hardware capabilities. And they don't have to, but they do. And this is why we see class action lawsuits all the time for this reason. It's the roles have reversed. Now it's software that has to keep up with the hardware. And this is not a place we should be.
Yeah. That planned obsolescence works out for Apple. All right, I think that's all we have time for. It looks like we're a little over already. So thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate you being here. And also a big thank you to you, Martis, for sharing your wisdom with the group. As a reminder, next Friday at noon, we'll be telling some Halloween horror stories from entrepreneurs, talking about the scary times of running their startups and what they did. So sign up for that, and we will see you all next week. Until then, have a great weekend.